Well, here we are getting into the month of June, and in the month of June, you have a lot of fish that are still shallow, but a big portion of the fish are really starting to move off the bank and onto offshore cover. Now, in this video, I'm gonna look at this map here on my Humminbird. I'm gonna show you a few different areas that just kind of stand out to me. Hopefully these same type of areas will stand out for you, that you can apply this on the lakes that you fish and go out there and catch fish. Now, before we get into that, this video is brought to you by my apparel company, Fin Fishing. Guys, I just got a new product in. This is actually a long sleeve tri-blend t-shirt. It's not anything uber fancy like my sun shirts, but to me, this is just a chillax shirt. I really like a long sleeve t-shirt. I always have. And this is actually the exact same material as my short sleeve tri-blend t-shirts that so many of you have loved, but it's just a long sleeve version. Today, outside, it's like 65 degrees. It's kind of a cool day for almost being June here, and it's just a perfect shirt for me to wear. So guys, I'm gonna leave a link down below in the description. Shopping at Fin Fishing is truly the best way to help support this channel. All right, let's look at this map, and I'm gonna talk about a few kind of things that I look for in the month of June. Now, first thing I wanna talk about before I kind of look at some more offshore stuff is I wanna talk about the shallow water fish, because a couple of different things are happening right now towards the end of May, towards the beginning of June, and one is fry garters. You know, fry garters are an easy way to catch fish, if I'm being 100% honest with you, and that's because it's a visual thing. You know, if you get up into a lot of these little pockets, a lot of the same pockets where the bass have spawned, you see one over here, you see one over here, these kind of bigger spawning pockets, you're gonna go through those areas, and all of a sudden, you're just gonna see, you know, sometimes by a lay down log or a clump of grass or around a dock post, you're gonna see a ball of fry, you know, and typically they're fairly easy to see unless you're fishing pretty murky water. But I mean, it's just gonna be a cloud. It's a brownish, blackish cloud, and all these are is bass fry. Now, remember, male largemouth will protect those fry for up to a couple weeks at times. And so with that being said, these fish are very aggressive. A lot of times you can throw a number of different lures at that ball of fry, and you're gonna be able to catch that fish. Like, it's not hard fishing for the most part. And sometimes these are bigger fish than you think. I know there's kind of this misconception, I think, in bass fishing that all big bass are females. And while a lot of them are, there's still a lot of big bass that are also males. And those males, like I said, are gonna be the ones guarding the fry. So you can catch some big fish doing this. As a matter of fact, if you guys, fun fact for you, a couple of years ago, there was a 10-pound smallmouth caught up on Lake Erie. That fish was dissected by a biologist that I know. That fish was a male. So fun fact for you, males can be big ones, and chasing fry garters can be a great way to catch them. Now, also, something that I am looking for out there on the water are bluegill beds, brim beds. This is gonna be a great way to catch really big fish throughout the entire summer. Now, brim beds, bluegill beds, honestly, they can be anywhere. They can be all over the lake. I found them in 10, 12, 13 foot of water, you know, offshore. I've also found them in a lot of creeks. You know, similar to the bass, they like protected areas. They like areas where, sometimes even the exact same areas where the bass will have bedded, you will find bluegill beds. Now for me, I tend to find a lot of bluegill beds on secondary points in secondary pockets. So looking at a map like this one right here, if I zoom in, you see that there's just this little point right here on the kind of northern side of this particular pocket. This pocket, I can absolutely, this little point right here, I can absolutely see there being a bluegill bed kind of just on the inside, right down here. This would be an absolute, like, I can definitely see there being a little bluegill bed there. Here's another little main lake pocket. I can see there being a bluegill bed just on the inside here as well. Like I said, they're gonna be anywhere and they're gonna be everywhere. The big thing is that a lot of bass are gonna be hanging on the outside edge of these bluegill beds. And so not all bluegill beds are going to have bass, even if you have active bluegills on them. The big thing with this pattern to me is it is exactly like fishing brush piles, and it is exactly like fishing docks. You know, when I'm on a good dock bite, typically the more docks that I can hit in a day while being efficient, the more bass that I'm going to catch. Not every single dock is gonna have a fish, but maybe one out of every 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe one out of every 10 docks is gonna have a bass. But still, if you can hit 50, 60, 70 docks in a day, you're gonna catch a lot of fish. Same thing applies with bluegill beds. You know, if I start seeing active bluegill beds, sometimes the best thing you can do is really just run the bank looking for these things. And the best thing is you can see them with your eyes. You can obviously see them with your electronics, but a lot of times you can look down into the water and see them. Now, if you have a dock close by, a stump, a patch of grass close by, any type of cover close by, a lot of times you'll see bass that are lingering around those areas, and they're gonna shoot out to get bluegills. Now, there's a number of baits that you can use in that situation. I like poppers, I like prop baits. I use a lot of top waters because these fish are typically fairly aggressive. So even a big glide bait can work at times. So that's the type of things that I'm gonna look for when it comes to kind of June fishing up shallow. Fry garters and bluegill beds. Now, let's talk about something that really to me is what I like to do, and that's fish offshore. Fish offshore cover. Now, one of the biggest things that you can do to really kind of eliminate time out there on the water, especially if you're fishing lakes that don't have a ton of pressure on them, but even lakes that have a lot of pressure, when you look at a map like this, if I just kind of look at what I'm saying, a 30,000 foot view. I don't know how high I'm actually above this, but if you kind of pull yourself back, you see a lot of these places on the map where you have black lines that are kind of darker. And basically what I mean is you have topographical lines that are really all close together. These all represent drops and or rises in the bottom. And if you have a drop in a bottom, especially if it's kind of around or near a spawning area, that's going to be a prime place to catch bass. The only problem with that is that a lot of other anglers are going to see that, and they're going to also check out those particular areas. Now, with that being said, some of the biggest community holes that I have ever found on lakes that I didn't even know were community holes until I started fishing them. Lakes like Lake Chickamauga I've been to, or up at Erie, or even on the St. Lawrence River, or Wheeler Lake. There's been a ton of places that I have been over the years where I find this area and I'm like, man, from a map, this looks perfect. And guess what? There's fish there, but also guess what? It's a community hole. And that's the reason that fish are there. So the thing that you kind of have to just deal with is pressured fish. And sometimes that just means that you have to switch up your lures. Instead of kind of fishing the thing that everybody else fishes, you know, if it's a ledge, maybe a deep diving crankbait, you might have to switch things up. Throw a drop shot, throw a shaky head, something a little bit more finesse, throw a hair jig, pop it off the bottom, throw a big spoon that, you know, a lot of guys may not always fish. So you kind of have to just think, is this a type of area that a lot of guys are going to fish? I'm not saying that it's not going to hold bass, because these are obviously absolutely areas that hold a lot of bass, but you really just have to think when you find fish, hey, is this a type of fish that is probably seeing a lot of pressure? And to me, that happens when you're looking at these tight lines on your topographical maps. Now, with that being said, a couple of sneaky tricks that I have found to work really, really well is, one, if you have an area that you kind of realize this is a community hole, always look like 100 yards, give or take, around that immediate area. Because what happens often is that you will find a really good little point. Maybe it's a creek ditch that runs out to the main river channel. And right where that river channel and that creek channel, that main river channel meet, there's a little point there, and that is where bass are all the time. A lot of guys are going to see that on a map. A lot of guys are going to check that out. But it doesn't always mean that bass aren't there. So if you go there and you don't find bass, what I like to do is simply check 100 yards kind of up and down the ledges in the little creek channels that are really close by. Because sometimes the fish aren't exactly where you found them. They move up because of the pressure. I feel like I'm not explaining that well enough. But they will just move fairly close to where that community hole kind of is, if that makes sense. So I think a lot of us, we get to an area, we see 3 or 4 boats there, they're all fishing the exact same cast, the exact same place that we want to be, and we end up just moving on. But sometimes that pressure will just push the fish in a direction, either closer or sometimes up on top of stuff. Instead of being on that lip where it goes from deep to shallow, they will be up on top of the stuff, maybe in 7, 8 foot of water. Maybe there's a stump there, a small rock pile where the pressure has actually pushed them up to. So always look within 100 yards of a community hole and try to find where will these fish go if the pressure starts getting too much to them. Now, with that being said, let's talk about something else. Now, if you guys have seen the study video that I did on Bass Fishing HQ, you know, there is a tremendous amount of fish that are living their entire life on flats. You know, down in Texas, they saw that 41% of the bass lived on flats. Now, I love flats really starting in June all the way until, you know, towards the end of the year when things really start getting cold. Because to me, flats are just, they're just a vast area where bass can live and do their thing. And they're typically unpressured, but they take a lot more time to find the bass. So there's a double-edged sword to all this bass fishing. So when I'm looking at a map, one of the biggest things that I want to find if I'm looking for a flat is I'm looking for good spawning area close by. So for example, if you kind of look at this particular spot on this map right here, there's kind of this small little thumb-looking pocket. And to me, those pockets that kind of turn in like that are always good little spawning pockets because they add just an extra little amount of protection for bass because they kind of curve like that. So I can almost guarantee that bass are going to spawn in this general area. Now, if you look directly out from that area, there's kind of just a flat. You know, it's more or less a tapering flat, but you can see right here, over the course of over 400 or 500 feet, looking at my little dial down here, it only goes down about 4 feet. So you're looking at about 100 foot, over 100 foot distance, it goes down about 1 foot, which is pretty much a flat. Now, these type of areas can be dynamite, but you have to find what the bass are relating to on that area. So what that may be just depends on the body of water that you're fishing. Some lakes that have a lot of grass on them, you know, I am looking for something irregular in the grass. You know, if your lake has a lot of rock on it, what I look for is maybe a little bit bigger, bolder chunk rock, something that is just different. Maybe it's an area where it goes from rock to sand or sand to rock. You know, there's a lot of different things it could be. It could be a random stump all by itself, isolated stump, isolated brush pile. These can be really good areas, but they take a while to find, but they're sneaky areas. When you find them, you can have these things to yourself and you can catch fish for years to come on these pieces of cover. So when you go to look at a lake map like I am right now, you know, I always suggest, you know, one of the sayings that I've come up with over the years is don't avoid the obvious, because that's something that I did for a long, long time and it burned me. I always wanted to try to find this sneaky thing, which can be good, but sometimes it's a matter of fishing the obvious and making a lure change that can really set you up for success. Now, like I said, if you can find and you can spend the time idling over these areas, using your electronics, looking for isolated pieces of cover, even fish themselves, it can be awesome. The only thing is that I like to find, if I'm fishing a flat, I don't love finding fish that are just on bait fish all the time, because those fish, their cover is the bait fish. Wherever the bait fish are, the bass are gonna be. So if there's bait fish there, you're good. If not, I like there to be a home where those fish can live. That's why I'm looking for pieces of cover like stumps, brush piles, grass lines, rock piles, whatever it may be. Because if those fish, it at least gives me something to target as opposed to just aimlessly casting and following fish around with live, which obviously can be really good, but sometimes you might find something a day in advance and you come back and those bait fish are gone, and guess what? The bass are gone too. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, kind of talking about June fishing, some things that I like to look for. If you want to watch a video all about the June lures that I like to use, I'm going to leave a link for my Bass Fishing HQ video I just put out right here. I will see you guys tomorrow.